All right, and we're recording. Perfect. All right, so quick summary of the exam last time. Mean came out to just under 79%, median at 83%, and then you can see the distribution here. So a little bit of a negative skew to the data. Standard deviation of 19.21%. Questions, comments, concerns about the exam?
I think I definitely overthought some of the things that were a lot simpler than they were. So that was good.
Yeah, well, it's nice to come in over-prepared and overthinking things to a certain degree. Well, hopefully y'all have gotten a good idea as to what my exams are going to look like for this class. Again, I'm not going to try to trip you up. I am going to care about your ability to actually apply the information. All right. So if you've taken one of my classes before, you know I do this usually after the first exam. I think it's kind of goofy that we wait until the end of the semester to have y'all provide feedback. Because y'all don't benefit at all from that feedback. And so what I'm going to have y'all do, you all have computers, and y'all obviously have computers if you're logged in here. Go to Canvas, and on Canvas under assignments, you should see an assignment that says start, stop, continue. And so use this for the next few minutes to provide some feedback. And we're going to split it up such that start is things that I'm not doing you want me to start doing in class. Stop are things that I am doing that you want me to stop doing in class, and continue are things I am doing that you want me to continue doing. Obviously, going through Canvas, it's not going to be anonymized. If you want to provide anonymous feedback, you can do so by emailing our staff assistant. Just tell her that you want it to be anonymized feedback, give it to me, and she can do that. But go ahead and take the next couple minutes, go ahead and fill that out, and then we will continue on with class. Take an extra 53 seconds to finish up here. So, do you have your computer here? Yeah, if you want to take it out, just log on to Canvas. Canvas is a section that says start, stop, continue under assignments. That's just an extra credit thing. So you can provide your feedback. So start with things you want to start doing, I'm not doing, stop things I am doing, you want to stop doing, and continue things I am doing, you want to continue doing. So just do that a little couple of minutes here. All right. If you're not done, you can finish up while I'm talking. So you'll have, I think, until the end of this class period to actually fill that out. And I appreciate you all giving me the feedback. I think it helps me kind of adjust my teaching style to be what y'all are looking for and what you need in class. But it also, I think, should help you in that I'm going to try my best to actually adjust to what y'all are requesting of me. If there are things that are recurring themes that I feel like I can't address or shouldn't necessarily change, I will try my best to explain why I'm not going to change those. Every time I ask for this, some smart aleck, excuse me, gives some sort of response like get rid of the exams, and I'm not going to do that. But I will happily try and incorporate all sorts of your feedback if possible. Also, if it's just kind of a one-off thing and or it contradicts with things that other people are saying, I'll try to weigh what makes the most sense with that moving forward. Any current comments, questions, concerns about the class so far? General issues you want to address? Nothing? Cool. Well, I'm very amenable to feedback. I've got thick skin. I've been called much worse than anything y'all can call me. So feel free to provide that feedback. All right. Here is your fun fact of the day. Queen Elizabeth is a trained mechanic. How about that? I like to think that she does all of her mechanicking in her little white gloves. Probably not, though. All right. So I need to really quickly unmute. All right. So here we are going to start class with a clip from the greatest movie of all time.
The stewardess said that. Both pilots.
Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Doctor, I've checked everyone. Mr. Stryker's the only one.
What flying experience have you had?
Oh, I flew single-engine fighters in the Air Force, but this plane has 4 engines. It's an entirely different kind of flying, altogether.
It's an entirely different kind of flying.
Besides, I haven't touched any kind of plane in 6 years.
Mr. Stryker, I know nothing about flying. But there's one thing I do know. You're the only one on this plane who can possibly fly it. You're the only chance we've got.
I'm glad y'all get that reference. All right, what are we doing here? All right, Zoomies, can you hear me again?
Yeah.
Perfect. It was critical that we show the very scientific clip there. If you have not seen the entire movie, you owe it to yourself, just as a human being, to watch that movie. And obviously, I brought that up because today we are talking about displays. So, it's important to make a distinction between a display and an interface. A display is just going to be one directional. It gives you information. So for example, the tachometer on your vehicle, that is a display. An interface, on the other hand, allows for that interaction. So the back and forth. My iPad here has an interface. It can give me information, but I can also feed that back. We can characterize displays in terms of static or dynamic. Static meaning non-changing, dynamic meaning changing. And when I ask you to conceptualize a display, most people think of kind of a visual display of information. But we can also conceptualize displays as an auditory display, a vibrotactile display, etc. So just as with the multiple resource theory, when we talked about it's important to offload different sensory modalities for the processing of information, you can think about offloading them with these different displays. And so we're going to go over each one of these more in depth. But when we talk about these sorts of design principles, right, we want to think about perceptual principles, right? So the actual ability of your system to formulate a percept of what it's seeing. This will include things like making displays legible, avoiding absolute judgments. We'll talk about that. You also have mental model principles, right? And mental model is just referring to what's going on in your brain. When you think about something, what's going on up there? And we'll show how that works together. You have attentional principles, right? We've already talked about attention a little bit to this point with things like the sieve model, or that attention is a finite resource. And then we have memory principles, right? We've already talked about how fallible memory is. And so needing to incorporate memory into your consideration. So first and foremost, perhaps not foremost, but first, you want to make displays legible, obviously, right? This seems very intuitive, this seems very obvious. But again, go back to the early days of the internet and look at how illegible a lot of those displays were. If it's an auditory display, you want to make it audible. If it's a tactile display, you want to make it discernible. Right? You don't necessarily want to put a vibrotactile belt on an operator and then put them in a helicopter that's going to vibrate, right? So you want to incorporate principles we've already discussed, things like contrast and color, polarity, visual angle, spatial frequency, illumination. If it's auditory, the signal intensity over that noise intensity, so the background sound. Things about frequency masking. Did we talk about Apple computers and the fan in here? No. So, we did? Oh, okay. Well, just as a quick recap, Apple in their computers has a fan to cool down, just like all other computers. But what they've done is cut the blades in such a way that it actually masks that sound, right? And so you can think about the fact that if you get waves that are out of sync, auditory waves that are out of sync, it masks the sound. That's what happens with those noise-canceling headphones. So you want to make sure that you're avoiding any sort of frequency masking. And so when you've got a display, you want it to be such that you've got black text over a white background, right? You could think about potential issues associated with this no camping sign, and we'll talk about kind of the representation of symbols. But having a red cross through on a dark brown background over time is going to fade, which is going to look a lot like the camping permitted signal. Right? You can think about all these types of signs you've seen that violate even this basic principle of making things legible. Aside from the fact that nobody wants to spend the time actually reading the sign on the left, you're also going to have to probably get pretty close to it to be able to discern what it says. The right-hand side, though, this kind of standard highway sign does a fairly good job of making things that are legible both day and night, right? The reflectivity of these signs. But you also got a good gestalt grouping here, such that the primary source of information about what you care about is going to be up top, saying it's an exit to 56 North towards Metropolis. And on the bottom, you've got this secondary information that is perceptually grouped from that primary information in a way that allows you to attend to it as a secondary source of information, this saying that you're in an exit-only lane. You want to avoid absolute judgments when you can. Humans are really bad at making absolute judgments. We tend to be very good at making relativistic judgments. This is better than that. This is louder than that. But we're not good at providing absolute. Right? So think about it when it comes to discerning pitch on a piano. Almost everybody can say that note's higher or lower than the one you played before, but very few people are able to actually, with that absolute perfect pitch, say that's a C. Right? Or that's an A flat. If you are going to require them to make absolute judgments, avoid having them make a judgment that requires more than 5 to 7 possibilities. So how bright is this? 1 to 5. Well, not ideal is better than how bright is this? 1 to 100. Categorical variables, so things like color and shape, are going to be easier to judge than those continuous variables. right? Even though the three of y'all in class right now are wearing different colored shirts, and I couldn't tell you the absolute color, I could give you kind of a grouping of those colors. And when it comes to colors, using kind of that general Roy G. Biv, right? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, is going to be better than trying to figure out what the heck chartreuse is. I still don't know the answer to that. All right, so you can get a fairly good idea just based off of your own tuition what's going to be better and worse here. Right? This top left graph, or this map, is requiring, while only a few different colors, it's requiring you to discern between colors that are very close on the spectrum, right? So you have to be able to see that this area right there corresponds to probably this one, right? But you have to bounce back and forth. Whereas this kind of map makes it really easy, right? I grew up just outside of DC, and we had the Metro, and you had the red line, the orange line, the blue line, I think. It's been a while since I've been there. Right, but you can look at this graph and know really quickly which one's which. The bottom left is an example of unnecessary complexity. While they have spanned the visible spectrum, they've given us 50 different colors for that map. If you didn't know that, I want to make sure I don't screw up here, that this is Iowa, you wouldn't really be able to tell that by going to the legend. The bottom right, however, is an example of a good display because it has, what do we have? We have 6 different categories that are all very discernible from one another in color. So I don't have to see what shade of blue this is. I can just tell that it's blue. So a question on your exam this past time was, in a high-risk environment, would you rather maximize top-down or bottom-up? And most of y'all got it, that you do want to maximize bottom-up in high-risk environments, but wherein the accuracy can be foregone to some degree. I mean, you don't want to design a display that allows for horrible accuracy. But wherein you can sacrifice that for efficiency, you want to maximize that top-down. So people are going to perceive and interpret signals based on what they expect to see. And if in your design, you're trying to include something that is not in that expectancy kind of mental model, then you got to maximize the bottom-up processing to make that salient. Right? All comes back to that sieve model. Right? Salience minus the effort plus, out of there, the expectancy plus the value. Right? Play off of that expectancy, wherein that expectancy is not going to help you enhance that salience. I shouldn't have just written over my graphics. Yeah, so you can think about what would make a bad display, such that if you've got a pilot checklist and everything is color-coded the exact same way, you read through, ensure system A is on, ensure system B is on. It's really easy to, once you get to number 4, just breeze past the fact that it's an outlier, right? Because the expectancy is such that this is going to be on, right? Or the word's going to say on. You really need to highlight that where possible. You could do that with highlighting that difference specifically. So by bolding, underlining, and making all capital the word off. Or you can just change the text color. Right? Make sure that the differences are highlighted that allow you to pick up on those differences. Here are 2 examples of probably offensive, but nonetheless bad and then good demonstrations of highlighting the difference. Right? On the left-hand side here, if you actually read down on the bottom, it says, "Don't go in here, men. This is the ladies' room," right? They're deliberately trying to screw with your expectations. On the right-hand side, they have just kind of poured on the differences in those depictions. You also want to exploit redundancy where possible, especially because in degraded conditions, it's easy to miss information. And you want to enhance the likelihood that somebody's going to notice something, so present it in various other sensory modalities, right? So make it both auditory and visual. Or you can play off within the same sensory modality, additional redundancy. So color and shape. A red stop sign. Do tone and voice. Right? That's why when you get that broadcast from the emergency management system, it gives you a tone, and then they'll give you the additional voice warning. It's important, though, that this redundancy you're trying to exploit doesn't just repeat the same warning or alarm or alert. Because if I missed it the first time, chances are I'm going to miss it the second time. Who can think of a real-world example of a display that exploits this redundancy gain?
Can you hear me, Nathan?
I can.
The thing that comes to mind, I do a lot of home recording with music, and the transport controls, like the triangle, the green play, the black square stop, and then of course the circle red record button. Those are all redundancies so that you know exactly where the record button is, you know where the play button is, or like the double arrows in each direction to rewind and fast forward. Same thing on a VCR.
Yeah, that's great. So you're doing not only the shape, but also the color. Yeah, that's fantastic. You can also think about things like fire alarms, right? Visual and auditory. Right? In aircraft. So in aircraft, the stall warning is usually a flashing light in addition to usually some voice that says stall, stall, right? It's trying to capture your attention visually in case there's radio traffic that you're not able to hear over. But it's also presenting that information auditorily in case your eyes are distracted somewhere else.
I just want to make sure I have the concept.
Yeah.
So, how about helmet moves? The helmet moves like you know you're not supposed to I guess, eat it or put it somewhere it's not supposed to go. With the color orange, or with the tight cap and the color orange, kind of signify that hey, this is, you know, it's an item that you should put as this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be a very good example wherein it's unlike a nozzle you would use for anything else in life. So you've got that shape, and then you also have that color in there. Yeah, great example. Yes, don't be putting Elmer's glue on anything.
I was thinking about wrench, and I was like, wrench. Looks like. Oh.
It does. Yes. Here's one of the more disturbing things. You know how in those commercials, they always make the food look so appealing? They frequently, for milk, they use glue as a substitute because it like supports the actual weight of the cereal, and it stays a nice, vibrant white color. Yeah. You want to make information discriminable. You want to be able to tell the difference between sources of information. It used to be the case in cars that you would have, man, I don't even know which one's which at this point. So you'd have your speedometer here, which looks very similar to what your speedometers are in your car currently, that jump up by tens. And then you would have your tachometer, which would also jump up by tens. Right? So now your tachometer probably jumps up by thousands. So you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if you see, it says, you know, each of these times 1,000 is your actual RPMs. But you can see how you'd quickly be able to get confused of, you know, you look up here and you think you're going 40 miles an hour. In reality, your engine's turning at 4,000 RPM, but you're really going 50, 55 miles an hour. This is why you now get displays that not only have these different numberings, but also, also have very discriminable backgrounds, like the yellow here. All right, they want to make it as easy as possible for you to look down and differentiate between what you're looking at. You can see real world examples of this, where in the US, we've got pennies that are a different color. But then besides that, we're largely relying on the size, right? There are some idiosyncrasies wherein nickels have flat sides to them. But there's not really all that great of discriminability. And you can tell this if you ever go and just get a roll of pennies, chances are you're going to find like a dime in there or something. Whereas other countries tend to have not only different sizes and different colors, but also different shapes, right? Trying to make it more discriminable. All of our money, at a quick glance, looks the exact same, right? It's all these greenbacks. Whereas a lot of other countries, or in this case, the European Union, use money that has different colors and really serves to highlight the difference with making these numbers extra big. Questions about any of those perceptual aspects of design? Awesome. And so you want to think about making this as easy as possible perceptually for not only somebody in kind of a low risk, low changing environment, but also what happens when your operator takes this out into the real world is in a stressful environment. All right, we'll talk about controls and bad actual controlled displays, but thinking about, okay, if in a nuclear power plant, I'm not presenting that information in a way that makes it so unavoidably obvious that something's wrong, we may have big issues. Right? And this is essentially what the computer virus Stuxnet did in just essentially masking any signals that something was going wrong. And there was insufficient kind of quote unquote stupid redundancy in those alerts that they couldn't pick up on the fact that anything was actually going wrong. So now on to mental models. Leverage pictorial realism when possible. Make that display look like the variable it represents. So here, when you have your heading indicator in an aircraft, you can tell which way you're pointing because the pointer indicator is your aircraft. It's your plane. So when you've got moving parts, make them move in a spatial pattern or direction similar to what they're representing. Right, so on the left here, you can see the aircraft is represented by this little V. You can tell the horizon because blue is up, brown is down. And as you're banking to the left, your little fake airplane here in the middle looks like it's banking to the left. It's moving in agreement with you. However, it's important to know that we're actually much better at rotating the world around us conceptually and in our minds than we are at rotating ourselves in the world. All right, so this display over here on the left, that airplane is always going to be pointing in the direction it is. And what moves are the numbers and directions in the background. We're always pointing the same direction, and everything is rotating around us. That is a much better display than what you have over here on the right. On the right, what you have is a fixed background of the numbers and directions, and an airplane that itself moves against that backdrop. And if you don't believe me that this is a meaningful difference, on your phones, when you have the GPS navigation, you can set it to being north up or heading up. All right, and the default is the heading up, right? So your car is always facing the same direction, and the map rotates around your car. But you could also change it such that the map always stays the same orientation and your car rotates it around it. And try to navigate using that. Right? It gets a little more tricky when you're trying to make those mental rotations. All right, so remember when we talked about the sieve model, we talked about the effort factor in sieve, such that increasing the effort makes it less likely that somebody's going to attend to that information. And if you want somebody to attend to that information, you need to minimize the cost associated with accessing that information. All right, so that cost can be both time and effort. And that effort can be mental effort, or it can be physical effort. So if you're trying to design a display where somebody's going to attend to whatever information you're presenting to them, first try to put it in the foveal region, right? So no effort is required for them to look at it because they're looking right at it. If you can't do that, or things are starting to get too cluttered, put it in an area where only the eyes have to move. I don't have to move my head. I don't have to move my trunk. I don't have to turn all the way around. You're also making it faster that way, right? Eye saccades, or eye movements, are taking place in terms of milliseconds. Head movements, you're starting to get into potentially the realm of seconds. And if you can't do that, then put it in an area for normal head movements, right? Think about your vehicle. You have that passenger side view mirror. It takes head movement, but it doesn't take you turning all the way around, right? And that's why if you look at drivers tend not to check their blind spots. Why? Because it takes a lot of effort relatively. It takes a lot of effort to turn around and check that blind spot. You also want to adhere to this idea of proximity compatibility. So keep sources of information that are connected, related to each other, are necessary for cross-checking next to each other. All right? Don't require me to look all the way to the right and then all the way to the left to verify sources of information. All right? Put that key on the map close to where that information is. Nearness or closeness tends to convey association or meaning to us. So things that are close together, we tend to group conceptually. So put all the speed information in one area. It's all related, and now we know where to go look for that speed information. And you can associate with in other ways, right? So any of the Gestalt grouping principles we talked about certainly have a home here in this display design. You want to make sure you avoid clutter where possible. All right, so here you can see they've done a good job with this aircraft display, where related information is all immediately next to that primary display. The primary display is conveying all that information put together, but each of these displays provides more information that is close, and I can check and verify. Put all the information for the radio up here. Put all the information for climate control down there. So as we already talked about with the multiple resource theory, use different mediums to present that information. Rely on different modalities to present the information. If you've overloaded visual information, don't put more visual information out there because they're just not going to be able to notice it. They're not going to be able to pay attention to it. Think of displays as being like an investment portfolio. Diversify. On to the memory principles. So where possible, replace things that you would otherwise have to store in memory, human memory, not computer memory, with visual information. All right, we're better at recognition than we are at recall. I probably couldn't tell you how to do half the things I like doing in Excel if I didn't have that opportunity to get the prompts for the algorithms they use. And if you're involved at all with coding, right, one of the things that you may recognize is that certain development environments are going to be better for you, especially as you start learning a coding language, because it'll either try to auto-populate what you're trying to say or give you clues as to what your options are, what are the arguments, that this function can take, etc. You also want to try, though, to not overload them with that knowledge in the world, right? If you present every source of information that could be relevant, it now becomes too cluttered and unusable, right? Looking down here, if I put every single possible thing on that I could do on top of this Word document, it becomes too cluttered to be useful. You also want to be using this whole concept of predictive aiding. All right, so remember when we talked about situation awareness? Level 3 of SA is projecting into the future. Humans aren't really good at predicting what's going to happen, both in near term and far term, especially under stress. Right? Stress tends to narrow our window to the world. And so a good predictor display can aid human performance through increasing situation awareness. All right, this is why some vehicles now have this kind of forward collision assist or forward collision warning, where they'll frequently be able to pick up on not just immediately what the car in front of you is doing, but maybe 1 or 2 cars in front of that, and provide that sort of assistance to say, whoa, we think there's about to be a collision, and alert the driver. Because this now becomes a perception task rather than a working memory task. Right? Perception's automatic. Doesn't take a lot of cognitive resources. Working memory, on the other hand, does. Right? You can think about real-world predicting or predictive displays like you have with your phones that are giving you the indication of what traffic is going to be like, allowing you to make those decisions ahead of time rather than waiting until you get into traffic. Maintain consistency where possible. So old habits die hard. If I've been trained on one thing and then I'm given something completely new, chances are I'm going to default to my old past experiences. One example that you may have had with this is you move into a new apartment and you zone out on the way back from school at one point and you're driving that old route back to your old apartment. Right? Old habits die hard. Also maintain that consistency of both color and placement, so I can jump from one system to another or jump back into a system. And a good rule of thumb is if all else fails, just standardize the display. Don't allow for too much customization. So you can see here, things we're all familiar with, right? The stop sign is frequently used even in non-driving environments. But also think about, it's so much easier for you to see the outlier here than if I give you that top display, right? This sticks out because it's different than all the others. If I'm having to make comparisons against ones that are all over the place, it's going to take forever for me to make sense of it. I always struggle with this word. So I'm just going to say, try and leverage icons that are visible and legible, discriminable, meaningful and in an obvious location. Right, I've always loved these dry your hands here because it does in fact kind of look like you're receiving strips of bacon. It's not at all clear what these top two buttons are doing. I assume those are high beams, but I don't know why there's a squiggly line running through both of those. It's also not clear what that controls, that little wheel on the bottom, right? There's no icon that makes that all that obvious. Toyota does a lot of good things when it comes to reliability, but my Tacoma is a masterclass in stupid design for displays. Right? The displays for changing the volume and changing the track are the exact same, and yet they've also put them in a stupid configuration. So I'll rant about that another time. All right, so also design displays that do the mental work for your user, right? Arrange or integrate multiple if possible. So now I can look at one display and get an entire picture of what's going on. When everything's okay, everything's squared away, things should be symmetrical, right? We like symmetry. And it allows for us to quickly look and see if there's an asymmetry. So look at this display here, right? On the top, you have all green, which is now covered by red. That was stupid. But you have the asymmetrical chunk coming out of it. Really quickly allows you to see, okay, what is the outlier in this case? Similarly, present information like you have down here, wherein if all engines are okay, all those bar indicators are at the same level. However, when you've got a reduction in power, you've broken that alignment. I can now quickly see what is not like the others. You only be display. Now we have
Can you repeat what you said?
I don't hear anything.
Yeah, it was very choppy.
I couldn't understand what he said either.
Uh-oh, he's across the room. Let's see.
Oh yeah, I'm not hearing anything at all.
Oh, man. Nate, can you hear us? I'm going to take that as a no.
Must be a pretty involved example.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
When did y'all
we
lose
missed
me?
this whole slide.
This whole slide.
3 minutes ago, yes.
Oh, well, this
Sorry.
slide is the most important one, so
No.
we're not going back to it. Just kidding.
We
All right. So really quickly, in summary, the benefits of a heads-up display is going to be that it reduces the information access cost in that it allows you to quickly look from thing to thing without having to move your head or eyes all that far. It allows for conformal images, right? And so you can present the horizon here, which is not going to be all that beneficial when it's clear sky, no clouds during the day, but at nighttime, that's going to present a real benefit, or in the clouds. It allows for your eyes to not have to reaccommodate to information. So, you know, if you're looking out at the road and you look back at your car, your eyes are going to have to adjust a little bit. However, with one of these I don't know why I always struggle with this word, also, collimated images, you're quickly able to accommodate from information out in the world and information on that display. However, there are costs associated with it in that it can present a lot of clutter. There's a lot of extra information that doesn't necessarily need to be there, or if it does need to be there, is going to be doing things like hiding events in the real world. It can also be hard to read what's on that display. All right, a light green on a bright blue backdrop is going to be next to impossible to read, or it's just not going to be good enough contrast. I'm not telling you all the secret answer that I told the rest of the people in class, though. And so, in addition to having it actually displayed on a window, you can have it mounted in a helmet. You're going to get a lot of the same advantages, right? Including minimizing that information access cost. Can impose images, not impose images over a greater range. But you have the same issues that you have with the heads-up display. You also have issues with binocular rivalry, right? And so at a certain point, presenting that information to those two eyes is going to create a parallax. And they ran into this issue with the F-35 helmet when they were going to refuel. You can also get slight latencies, right? So if you've ever played some of the early games in virtual reality, you can notice there's a little bit of a latency as you turn your head to what's actually displayed. You can also have legibility issues. That image is jittering. And wearing some heavy crap on your head is going to strain, fatigue, or potentially even injure your neck. All right, then really quickly, we're going to blow through these last things so I can meet with, I don't remember which team I said I was going to meet with today. I think the PDX team. But we're just going to go quickly over these because they're going to be useful for all of y'all in writing your actual. There are certain principles that are best suited for different presentations of information, right? And here's just kind of a good standard from what's in your book. And you can see based off of what type of question you're trying to answer, these are going to be the best types of graphs to present. You know, don't present a bar graph, which insinuates clear, distinct categories when what you're interested in is a continuum. All right, so if the x-axis is a continuum, present, for example, a line graph. Yeah. This lecture, displays, I think. Cleverly named, if I say so myself. Yeah, the file should already be uploaded. Present information right near where it needs to be accessed. Again, write condition B right next to that line, and condition A next to this line, rather than requiring people to look at the line and go over and look at a key. Stack information when possible, right? So present it on one graph rather than two separate graphs that are going to require me to look at where a certain point falls on the x-axis and try and compare that to another graph. Where possible, maximize the differences here. So both of these are squares, but that square is hollow, this square is filled in. It jumps out at you really quickly, unlike what you've got over here, where same color, just different shapes, right? So prioritize that color. And then obviously, if you've got a lot of data, avoid presenting something like you've got over here on the left, which is next to impossible to read, right? Try to simplify it, either by doing group means like you've got here, or figure out another way to present the data, because here you're losing a lot of information about variability in that backdrop. Questions about what we covered today?
I'll try to get this.
Okay, yeah, or feel free to shoot me an email and we can set up a time to meet and things like that. I know I kind of blew through everything here at the end. All right, which team did I say I was going to meet with today? Y'all should have gotten an email.
PDX.
PDX, okay, perfect. So the PDX folks hang around. Otherwise, everybody else, get out of here. And I will see y'all on Thursday. Was that? I forgot to give you crap about that after.
Yeah, honestly, I'm also going to do. I lost the game right now in the last second. Come on. I mean, probably understand a little bit, but that's all the calls. Oh, okay.